Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. The new book by author Cassie Keys is an exploration of betrayal, resilience, and healing. It's titled Staring at the Wall for Hours, The Torn Heart of a Pastor's Wife. Cassie is sitting right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We're going to talk all about this book. Cassie, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight.
Thank you, sir. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really happy to be talking with you, and I'm interested in staring at the wall for hours. Cassie, can you tell me all about it? What are readers going to find here?
They're going to find a lot of hurt, a lot of despair, some anguish, just the feelings, very deep feelings. This pastor's wife, they went through so much that the betrayal is the thing that really, really was very deep for her. A lot of betrayal, not only from the pastor, but from the community, from members of the church that she was at, but to the point where it actually took her to a place almost, I don't want to say suicidal, but she was almost at a point of a nervous breakdown. So it's a very deep, painful type of thing. But the good thing that came out of it was she learned through the whole process. And now the lessons she learned has guided her to the point where she can live happily and think about it now and talk about it now without it being so painful.
Cassie, what sorts of readers were you thinking of whenever you were writing this?
Really everyone, but especially anyone who may have experienced hurt, betrayal, pain, wanted to give up, wanted to just lay down and just die in a sense. Anyone that might have experienced that same type of thing, I think it would be a great encouragement for those people, for any reader at all, because we all know someone that's going through betrayal and hurt and pain. So I think everyone would be beneficial to read it, but especially the ones that have also gone through a type of betrayal.
And how did this come about, Cassie? What gave you the idea, the spark to get started?
The spark to get started was the life. Was the actual life experience that I went through. The writing started as a journal. The journal was to, sometimes you can't talk to people. So you have to turn inward. So when you journal, you can just pour your heart out, pour everything out without being judged, without being looked at with ugly looks. So the journaling started the writing.
And once you got started on this writing, clear up through when it was published and went out there, was this a long journey for you?
Actually, yes. This is the first of a trilogy of 3 books. And the first book is a very small book, but in actuality, it took me 6 years to write it. I actually started the book in 2018, and I went back to read what I had wrote, and emotionally, I couldn't deal with it at that moment. Every time I read it, tears would come and my heart would just ache, from the experiences. So I had to put the book down for a number of years, could not write, could not read it. That was the level of the emotional pain that was there.
So you have your manuscript, you send that off to the publisher, to Christian Faith, you start that publishing process. Cassie, what did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things for you?
Actually, working with Christian Faith publishers was very smooth ride because they were so helpful, walking me through every step. But the hardest part probably would have been, this is my first book, and, learning the process, I would say would be the hardest part. Learning what to do next and what it entails each step of the way. Each step that I took with them was a learning process. So I guess that would be the hardest thing.
So this is your first book. This is a story that is very, very personal for you. So when you finally got your first copy in of this and you were holding it, it was finally a real thing, Cassie. What was that like?
Oh, my goodness. It's like sheer joy. It was like, wow, I actually did it. I mean, I actually, when I saw the box, outside, I said, my book. And I was in awe for hours. Very proud of myself, too. Very proud of myself.
I think this book is going to bless so many readers. Again, it's titled Staring at the Wall for Hours, The Torn Heart of a Pastor's Wife. This is written by Cassie Keys, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and available anywhere, really, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Cassie, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am so elated. This has been so exciting. Thank you so much.
The new book by Danielle Pesch is an inspirational resource for couples. It's titled Guide to a Happy, Healthy, and Successful Marriage. Danielle is sitting right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We're going to talk all about it. Danielle, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Danielle, I'm curious about Guide to a Happy, Healthy, and Successful Marriage. Can you tell me all about what you've written here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do talk about me changing my mind about marriage, because at first I was like, I'm never getting married. So you'll hear about me, how I had ended up changing my mind and ended up getting married. You'll read about learning each other, growing together, quality time together, communication, and making decisions together, and how all of that ties together into having that happy, healthy, and successful marriage.
What sorts of readers did you have in mind for this, Danielle?
Actually, anybody, mostly for if you're married, unmarried, anyone serious about what real love is and what marriage actually is, and actually wanting to learn and grow, this book is for them.
So, Danielle, what was that spark? What gave you the idea to get started on this?
So I actually was grieving the loss of my baby brother, and the Lord spoke to me and was like, hey, we're going to write this book about marriage. So I was like, okay, yeah, here we go. So I just started writing it right away, and it just flowed out of me naturally.
Have you ever done anything like this before, or are you fairly new to all this?
I have not. This is my first published book.
So once you got started on it, clear up through when it was published and out there for everybody, was this a long journey that you were on?
It was a long journey. It was about a year, but I enjoyed every step of the way of it.
Yeah, once you hand that manuscript off to your publisher, to Christian Faith, you get that whole process started. What did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end?
You know, I can honestly say there was nothing challenging about it. Everything went smoothly. I guess if I had to pick, the most challenging thing would have been putting myself out there.
And then that day finally comes after all that work you put into it, and you're finally holding it. Your name's on the cover and everything. It's a real thing. Danielle, what kind of a moment was that like for you?
You know, to be honest, it was very surreal, but I felt really blessed and I felt full of joy. And I definitely shed a couple tears. I teared up, but they were happy tears.
And now that you're officially a published author, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
I would say that knowing I'm capable of doing what I've always dreamed of doing, which was always being a writer, and this has given me the confidence to continue to write.
Well, speaking of continuing to write, do you have some more ideas? We might be seeing more from you here down the road?
Absolutely. I actually am working on a second book, and I have a third book in mind after the second one, too. So those will definitely, hopefully, come around in the next couple of years.
Fantastic. Well, this can be quite the learning experience doing this all for the first time. So we have a lot of authors listening to us, and they're just starting out as well. Danielle, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I do. I would say just go for it. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just ended up just going with the process. Just go with the flow. You'll learn as you go, and don't hold yourself back. It's so worth putting yourself out there and just learning as you go. And if you don't know what's going on, publishers are great, and they just walk you through it. So I would say do it.
Yeah, it sounds like this whole thing was pretty smooth for you. When you were writing this, was writer's block or anything like that something you had to get through?
You know, actually, I did not have writer's block writing this book. I wrote this book in about 4 months, and, you know, the Lord really spoke to me and specifically told me what to write about. So it kind of just flowed out of me naturally throughout that 4 months. But if writer's block is ever an issue for anybody, I would say just take the time to clear your mind, take a break for a couple weeks, clear your mind, and go right back to it.
I think so many readers will be blessed by this book. Again, it's titled Guide to a Happy, Healthy, and Successful Marriage. It's written by Danielle Pesch, published by Christian Faith Publishing, And really, available everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Danielle, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I had so much fun talking to you.
The new book by Aundray Alexander Dawson. It's titled Chai Zakar, Life Remembers. This book tells of the author's spiritual revelation and growth. Aundray is here with me now, and we're going to talk about this. Aundray, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
I'm glad to be here, sir, and thank you.
It is great to have you. Aundray, can you tell me all about Chai Zakar, Life Remembers, and what readers are going to get into here?
Well, the book is basically what I have written about my testimony, my personal testimony. Also, it touches a bit on philosophy, science, and faith.
Aundray, what kind of a reading audience did you have in mind for it?
Well, it's more intellectual. It's to reach, like the philosophers and the scientists, because the book, it touches on how God is the author of everything that exists. I present that to the scientists. And then also it talks about the wisdom of men. So I would apply that knowledge that man has. They would like to exceed above God's knowledge, but I presented that to philosophy to show that God's knowledge is greater. And then the faith aspect as well to, present the Lord Jesus Christ and that sort of thing.
Aundray, how did this come about? What gave you the idea to sit down and get started writing this?
Well, it was a promise I made to God that if He did this aspect in my life, if He allowed me to do something I asked Him to do in my life, I would follow Him. I'm just trying to make good my oath with Him. And also, it is about how I have fulfilled the promise that He has given me.
What does your writing background look like? Are you experienced in this kind of thing?
Okay, well, no, I haven't. It's just something I have. I got sick. And when I got sick, the thing is, I started to have a existential crisis. So because of that, I pushed myself too hard and I got sick. When I got sick, I started writing. And when I started writing, I started to remember the things I asked God for in my days of youth. And then from there, I started to write. And when I started to write, I started to remember everything that God had said, it came back to me.
How long of a process was this for you, the writing and the publishing process and everything?
The writing started about 2011, 2012, and then I started recollecting things that I should have been cognizant of, but after that, I found a job and I started, writing even more, and then after that, it took me about 6 years to complete the idea, but sometimes I still kind of do updates on it. So it's like an ongoing thing, but it took 6 years for me to have the meat of it.
And what was it like whenever you finally got to hold it for the first time and you were looking at this book, your finished product that you'd put so much work into?
Yeah, well, the thing is, to be honest, I'm somebody that doesn't show a lot of expression, so I felt it, but I didn't show it. But it was a good feeling that, okay, I turned my thought into something tangible in real life that people can actually interact with and not just my thoughts.
Have you given thought to writing more, maybe publishing more down the road?
Well, it's my testimony because, like I said, I'm a discover writer. I would have to be inspired to, get another inspiration. I wrote a short story, but I went ahead and included that also in the book. So it's kind of like one thing because the short story I wrote was basically about my friendship and what friendship with my friends and the things we used to do and how I'm trying to turn aside and, pick up the mantle of God's gospel. As for another book, I would have to be inspired again to write that.
Well, the title of this book is Chai Zakar, Life Remembers. It's written by Aundray Alexander Dawson and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So really it's available everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Aundray, thank you again for joining me and telling me all about your work. It was really nice talking with you tonight.
Yeah, it's really nice talking to you also, sir.
I'm looking at the new book by Virginia St. Aundray. It's titled The Ridgeway, and it's a novel that follows an FBI special agent. Virginia, the author, is right here with me now, and we get to talk all about this. Virginia, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to be talking with you, and I'm excited to learn all about The Ridgeway. So, Virginia, can you tell me all about what you've written here?
Well, like you said, it's about a special FBI agent. She's female. She kind of had a good but unusual youth, and she joined the Bureau and was assigned to a fictitious town in Iowa. And it's all about what happens while she's there and how she got there. She gets pretty tight with the assistant director from the Bureau. And so she, has a good relationship with him and everything. But everything just falls into place. There's like 4 cases that end up getting solved, and her team, she's got a very unique team, excellent characters. I love my characters. So they solve these cases, and then it all pulls together at the end.
What kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were writing this?
Readers that like what I like, mystery, women's sleuths. I love to read books that have a woman with a profile like this, strong, courageous, out there busting butt to solve crimes and everything. So that's kind of what drew me to this novel.
So is there anything in particular that sparked this idea for you that gets you started on it?
Well, I love to read Lee Clark, David Balducci, Michael Connelly. They write excellent things like that. I think there needs to be more women's sleuth crime mysteries out there. And reading some of theirs, I thought, if I wrote a book, that's what I'd like to write about. And I've always wanted to write a novel. I've started 3. This was my 4th one, and this one I finished.
Fantastic. Is this your first published one then?
Yes, it is. I'm working on the sequel now.
Wow, congratulations. So was this a long process for you, the writing and publishing and everything?
It took a year to write it, and then publishing it took almost another year. It was, the publishing aspect was very time-consuming, and I learned a lot along the way. I have a learning curve as far as technology goes, so I had to learn a lot of that along the way, but it all came out.
So when it came to that publishing process, Virginia, what did you find the most challenging part of it for you?
Well, writing actually was the easy part. The technology, like I said, was the tough part. But now it's the marketing that is the most challenging. I've done some book signings, and I love the book signings. I'm a retired educator, so I had one local where I taught, and a lot of my previous high school students came, and it was just so exciting because they have their own families now and everything, and that book signing was exciting. And my character was actually born in Russellville, Arkansas, and I went there and had a book signing in a nice little bookstore in town there. And I knew I was going to be writing a sequel, so I actually interviewed the chief of police there, and that was really exciting. Got a lot of ins when I talked to him.
So when you finally got that first copy in, it was a real thing. You were holding it in your hands, The Ridgeway. Virginia, what was that moment like?
It was pretty exciting because I kept thinking, what's it going to be like when it happens, I opened the box, and there it is, and it's like, oh, my gosh, and I see the title. I see the awesome cover that I designed and my name across it, and it was exciting. It was just very exciting.
Now that you are officially published, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
I think just the idea of completing it. And I would love to be, on the bestsellers list someday. But I think just completing it and seeing people's reactions, I've gotten a lot of great reviews on Amazon for it, and people's comments. I'm just, they just sometimes bring tears to my eyes.
Well, this novel really sounds exciting. I think people are going to love it. Again, the title is The Ridgeway. It's written by Virginia St. Aundray and published by Hawes & Jenkins Publishing. So get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also down the street at your local bookshop.
Virginia, thank you again for talking with me here tonight. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
All right. Well, I thank you for having me, and you be safe in all you do.
This is a book designed to help young readers see that Jesus forgives all his followers. The name of the book is Tit for Tat. Jesus is not about that. It's written by Julia Sexil, and Julia is here with me now. We get to talk all about this book. Julia, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Corey. Thank you.
Absolutely, Julia. Can you tell me all about Tit for Tat? Jesus is not about that. What are readers going to get into here?
Oh, my gosh. So this book, it is a book designed for elementary school readers through middle school, where it is a story about a teacher. Her name is Mrs. Jules, who takes her students on a wild adventure back in the past where they visit key events in history that helps paint the picture for her students what God's grace is and what it looks like.
How did this come about, Julia? What sparked the idea?
Well, the initial thing that sparked the idea, my husband, first of all, was actually the person that inspired me to do it, to write for children. And honestly, if I'm pulling back the curtains for a quick second, I never thought I would be writing a children's book. I always saw and had the dream of becoming an author, but writing for children was never my first plan. It was, how just God works things in mysterious ways. But what led to the idea of Tit for Tat, Jesus is not about that. It's based off of my own struggles from understanding about God's grace, because I came from a family. I'm one out of 9 kids. My dad was a pastor, and I was presented the gospel at a very young age. But honestly, I never really, the struggle that I always had at a very young age is that me not really understanding my worth in Jesus. And that led to me just living a life of shame, walking in defeat. And I really didn't understand the concept of God's grace. And fast forward, I'm in my 40s now. About 2 years ago, while I'm sitting in my car by myself, waiting for my husband to come back from the store, I just heard this whisper in my spirit, tit for tat. And I had no idea what those words meant. And then one thing led to another where God gave me the title, Tit for Tat, Jesus is not about that, where he took me on a journey to explain to me first what his grace is and what it looks like.
So once you got started on this, was this a long journey, clear up through the publishing and everything?
Well, we can say yes. The publishing journey, because of my own feelings of inadequacy and and it was very easy for me to compare myself to other people and convince myself that, what do I have to offer? So it really caused a delay in taking the necessary steps to actually search for a publisher. But, the Lord used my husband to where he took the initiative in looking up publishers to explain to them, here's the idea that I had. And one thing led to another. And I kind of just let God do the rest. And I was able to find a publisher to accept my manuscript to help me put my stories together.
And a big part of this book is the illustrations. So was that a difficult process to get those lined up exactly like you wanted?
It was. It really, really was. I think that was the most, for me, I think that was the most challenging because with coming up with the words, honestly, the words within a matter of weeks, the words just flowed. I mean, I would find myself waking up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, about to take on a full 12-hour shift for work. And I could not go back to sleep because the words just came. They just flowed without me even fighting for it. But when it came to the illustrations, when I finally had the packet in front of me to explain to another artist what is in my head, how can I transfer what I'm seeing in my head to on paper, it did take the longest.
Again, this book is titled Tit for Tat. Jesus is not about that. It's a book written by Julia Sexil, and it's published by Covenant Books, so really can get it pretty much everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Julia, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about Tit for Tat. Jesus is not about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
I would like to welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable author Prince Ampomah. Prince, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say congratulations. You have a new book out. It's titled Born Original, Lived a Copy. Embrace your story and live you. Prince, can you tell me all about this and what you've written about here?
Yeah, absolutely. What I've written is essentially trying to, if you will, add my voice to a narrative, which is this: many of us are born original. We are all born original, but many of us spend our time living as a copy of another person. And I believe that there's a temptation that exists, is an existential temptation to just live as a copy of somebody. In today's world, with social media and with advances in technology, that temptation is heightened. And so I'm just trying to bring this to the surface for our conversation, that there is something unique that is urged in us, and that is our source of impact. And so the book is simply about embracing who you are, embracing yourself, living authentically, living your originalities, your ideas, your dreams, in order to make an impact in the world.
Prince, what sort of a reading audience were you speaking to here?
A great question. You know, it's a fairly broad, it's a universal audience in many sense of the word, because we all go through moments where we're trying to find ourselves, if you will. In some parts of life, we're trying to discover who we are, trying to understand, is our story relevant to this world? Does our story matter to this world? And so it's really a broad and universal audience. But really, if I were to narrow it down, it is anyone who is seeking to unlock the impact and unlock the power of their uniqueness in order to make an impact in the world. And I want to assume that is almost everyone.
So how did this come about, Prince? What gave you the idea to get started on it?
So I have had the chance to live, school, and work in 4 different continents, from Africa to Europe to America, and I had a chance to work in Asia, so that makes it 4. And everywhere I have been, I have always been confronted with the question to conform to the homogenizing effect of the society, or really preserve my originality, preserve my authenticity, and preserve my uniqueness. And so this book came about from having been in cultures where I have been called myself to really live authentically within cultures that are not familiar to me. But I've found that in all instances, I've always been more impactful when I have drawn out my authenticity and used it to draw authenticity in others. And so I'm very confident and very excited about this book, because I believe it is something that burns at the fingertips of many, many people.
What does your writing background look like? Are you experienced in this, or are you fairly new to it all?
Well, I would say this is my first book, but in terms of writing, I do a variety of writing. Mostly I've done a lot of blogging and also just small article writing, white papers, etc. So I've done extensive writing, but the book itself is my first.
Once you got started on this, was this a long journey for you, writing it and then putting it through that publishing process?
Yes, it was. It was a long journey, an interesting journey. I would say that the writing process itself was an exciting, exhilarating, and sometimes therapeutic, if you will, in terms of the writing approach. And I've always made a comment that there's a book in everyone, and I believe that very strongly. There's a book in you, there's a book in everyone. And it was a long process, partly obviously because it is not my full-time job, but I did enjoy it, and it was very fulfilling. I was joking to someone that what is in chapter 1 was actually the last chapter that I wrote, and just learning the publishing process as well. But most importantly, getting people's reaction to the book initially, and now it is a book that is making a lot of waves and impact across many, many geographies in the world.
This book is titled Born Original, Lived a Copy. Embrace your story and live you. This was written by Prince Ampomah and published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can really find it anywhere like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Prince, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been wonderful talking with you tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
I'm looking at a fantasy novel that plunges readers into a magical realm. It's titled Sea and Shadow. It's written by M. Elizabeth Erb, And I get to find out more about this. The author, Elizabeth, is here with me now. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. Elizabeth, can you tell me all about Sea and Shadow and what readers are going to find?
Sea and Shadow is a romantasy that I wrote, and they're going to find a young woman named Daria who is a princess in this realm, and she is what I call a shadow blood. She is what you would find in traditional fantasy, a young woman who has dark magic like necromancy, witchcraft, voodoo. And it kind of plagues her a little bit because no one really wants to get to know her and no one really likes her because her magic is dark and terrifying. So it's a little bit of racism in there, a little bit.
Yeah, I love that term, romantasy. So would you say that readers who are normally into the romance and the fantasy novels would be most into this?
Absolutely. I am a big fan of romantasy myself, so authors like Sarah J. Maas, Rebecca Yarros, Carissa Broadbent. And so I decided, what kind of story could I write in a romantic fantasy setting? And that's Sea and Shadow's the product.
So is there anything in particular that sparked this, that gave you the idea for the story?
Nothing really in particular. I have a little sister whom I love dearly. And one day I was just kind of thinking about, what kind of story could I write about one sister who has light magic and another sister who has dark magic, and what that dynamic would look like? And what kind of story could I tell from there? And I've been writing stories since I was a teenager. And one of the things that I had in the back of my mind was a little sister is in desperate need of help. And the older sister goes on a journey to find the missing pieces of what I call the Oracle's eye, because those pieces together summon the Oracle, and she's able to ask her one selfless question. And so from there, it kind of spiraled, and I thought, well, if we're on a treasure hunt, why not have pirates? So it's been a fun thing since then.
So you said you've enjoyed writing for a long time. Is this the first time you've been published then?
It is. I call this story the apprentice version because I was mainly writing this story for fun, and my publisher found it and really enjoyed it. And so with that in mind, I went, let's remaster this. Let's dive more into the story, give it more world building, more character development. Let's make a real series out of this. And that's what I'm currently in the process of doing now.
So once you got started on this, clear up through the publishing, getting out there and everything, was this a long journey for you?
It was. The story, I've been writing on it for about 7 years now. And in that time frame, it's changed and things have been taken away and added. And as I said, I'm not even done with it because now we're remastering it. So the story's been with me for a long time.
So once you embarked on that publishing end of things, what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
The most challenging part of it was being able to just to keep going, because when you're writing, you really think that your story's great and the first draft is always the best, but it's hard to have an editor or your publisher go, it's good, but it could be better. And just kind of being able to step back and say, yes, it can be better, and go forth and rewrite it. And just keep it going until it's where you want it to be.
So this was a long time in the making, and then finally that day came for you. You open up the mailbox, and there it was. It was a finished product, a real thing, Sea and Shadow. You were holding it in your hands for that first time. Elizabeth, what was that like?
It was very surreal. I love ordering books, and I love getting them in the mail. And then when I got mine in the mail and opening it up and seeing my words, it's gone from a Google document, now it's a real book in my hand, and I can flip through the pages and actually read it like I would a Sarah J. Maas book. So it's been very surreal.
Well, this is a romantasy I think readers are really going to love. Again, it's titled Sea and Shadow. It's written by M. Elizabeth Erb, published by Newman Springs Publishing, and really available anywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with me here tonight. It was really great.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It's a tale of redemption and hope in the new book by Jennifer Cheshire. It's titled Fingerprints of Jesus. And that's what we're talking about right now. Jennifer is here with me at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about Fingerprints of Jesus and what readers are going to find when they get into it?
It is just a personal testimony of mine. Definitely a tale of God's love and faithfulness, mercy and grace, forgiveness. Definitely. It's my testimony. As a child, I went through a lot of abuse, loss. I had all these things that happened to me that kind of helped build who I was. And I grew up with all those feelings, fear and hopelessness, low self-esteem, all those things. But I did have a beautiful, God-fearing, God-loving grandmother who did teach me about Jesus. Definitely, I talk about her. She was such a lot.
Jennifer, what kinds of readers do you think would really connect with this book?
My readers, I pray, just anyone who has experienced abuse, loss in their life, really at any age. Young single mothers, it's super hard, who think that they can't go another day. And then to those who are, they find themselves in a broken marriage and hopelessness sets in and you just think that there's just no way to save it. And also people who maybe are experiencing sickness like cancer, whether it's themselves or maybe, they're walking with someone they love through cancer journey. And I definitely talk about that with my mother. And just resentment, past hurt. I would love for them to know that there is a better way. God loves them, He's for them, and there's definitely healing in His arms.
So what prompted you to write this book? What gave you the idea to start on it?
I had it on my heart for a while, reaching out to the world for answers for a lot of years and coming up empty, brokenhearted, and those feelings that I had growing up, trying to deal with everything that I dealt with, mistakes, just being a young mother, trying to protect my children, raise my children, and doing it out of fear and all those feelings that I never dealt with, taking that with me, even into marriage. And it took me almost, losing my marriage to not reach out to the world anymore, but reach out to God instead. And so He changed my life completely. He saved my marriage. That's when I knew that there are importance in stories. And if telling my testimony, I pray that there's somebody out there that may have been in that same spot, that may have thought those same things and went through those same situations. They too can find the peace and healing that only Jesus can give us.
So once you started on it and then clear up through when it was published and went out there to the world, was this a long process for you?
It took me 10 months. It took me 10 months to write it, and I really didn't think I could do it. I've never tried to do anything like that before. I prayed about it. I felt like it was exactly what the Lord wanted me to do. And I knew reading the Word, just trusting in Him, definitely took faith steps through that. And so I sat down, and it was incredible to write from the very beginning, from that little girl that felt all those things and went through all those things and walked through it with Jesus. And the healing process even then, as I was writing. So 10 months later, I have this manuscript of this beautiful promise that God tells us, that there's purpose in your pain, and that sharing your story, may help. You don't know who needs to hear that and when they need to hear it. So I feel like I was really guided, and I felt like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do. And it was just incredible to pray about it and find the publisher step by step through following and praying.
What a wonderful message in this book. Again, it's titled Fingerprints of Jesus. It's written by Jennifer Cheshire and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can get it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also right down the street at your local bookshop. Jennifer, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about Fingerprints of Jesus. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was amazing.
This is a novel that follows one young girl's path to heal from the shadows of her past. It's titled Traumatized. It's written by Michael Sims And that's what we're going to talk about. Michael is right here with me now. Michael, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Michael, I'm curious about Traumatized and what readers are in store for here. Can you tell me about it?
The book is about a young girl named Aundray who has experienced a great deal of trauma and shows an abundance of resilience through the story.
Michael, what kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
Well, it would likely include individuals who enjoy emotionally impactful stories such as psychological drama or narrators that explore themes of resilience, mental health, and overcoming adversity. The readers might appreciate the title because it signals an honest and raw exploration of personal struggles, which could resonate with their own experiences, or provide an insight into challenges others face. It may also appeal to readers seeking a deeper understanding of human emotions and the journey of healing.
Michael, how did the idea for this come about?
Well, talking to a few friends, and one day it just resonated with me. The word trauma, people always talk about, what trauma they've been through. And so I just sat down and I just created a character, Aundray, and I just put what everybody talked about into a book.
Have you ever done anything like this before, or are you fairly new to it all?
This is not my first publication, but this is my second one.
How long of a journey was this for you once you started off writing it, clear up through when it was published and out there?
On the stop and go thing, it took about 6 months.
And once you handed that manuscript off to your publisher and you started that process of publishing, there's so much involved there. What do you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things for you?
Well, basically the editing part, going back and forth with the editing part.
And then finally, that day comes. You get your first copy in and you're holding it in your hands for that first time. Michael, what's that moment like?
Yeah, it's a great feeling. It's undescribable, and knowing that your publication, all the work that you have done, that I have done, is on bookshelves in stores, like all around the world, and it just felt really good knowing that something that I put together as an idea into a manuscript and it worked. Now it's out there.
And are you the kind of writer that starts maybe with an outline, how things are going to go from beginning to end? Or do you sit down maybe with an idea, start writing, and see where it goes from there?
No, I have not done an outline for anything. Well, what I did, I started out as screenwriting, and then I converted it over into a manuscript. So I did do screenwriting first, and then I converted it over to the manuscript. But it became with an ideal. I just sat at my computer, and the words just came to me in my head, and I just put it on paper.
Is writer's block ever something that kind of gets in the way for you?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Man, what do you do when that strikes?
I pray about it, and then the words just come back to me.
So what are the chances that we're going to see some more from you here down the road, do you think?
Well, I am working on, I do have some other work that's done, but I haven't sent it out yet. And I am working on one now. Probably take me about another, maybe a month or two to get to complete it. So I have about 2 more right now that's already in the works.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking at Traumatized right now, and the cover is so striking. Was this a difficult thing to put together?
No, it wasn't a difficult thing to put together because in my mind, I see pictures, as word on top of word. So when I see in my mind how I will want the cover to be, that's exactly what I see in my mind.
Do you have anything maybe in the way of advice that you could toss out there for them?
No matter how long it takes, finish what you started. There's no golden rule that says you have to complete your project by a certain deadline. And I believe that procrastination is assassination of your dreams.
Well, it sounds like this book is going to bless so many lives. Again, it's titled Traumatized. It's written by Michael Sims, published by Covenant Books, and really available everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Michael, thank you again for talking with me tonight. It was really great.
I thank you all for having me on. Really appreciate you.
Grammy's Treasure Hunt, Luca's Lessons. That's the next in the series, written by Joan Marie, and we're going to talk all about it. Joan is here with me. Joan, welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. It's so wonderful to be talking with you again.
Thanks, Corey. It's great to be here as well.
Joan, can you tell me all about Grammy's Treasure Hunt, Luca's Lessons, and what readers are in for this time?
Oh, yes, I'd love to. In this book, it's about Luca, who's a 10-year-old boy who goes on a treasure hunt that involves a very unique ice hockey game. So some of the characters included is a trusted helper who's a penguin called Icy, 2 opposing teams of hockey players that are actually lion cubs and alligators, and a zebra referee named Zach. So in this book, Luca is the goalie for both of the teams, and he needs to use his physical skills and his personal beliefs to do the right thing in order to win his treasure. So this book is full of excitement and fun characters and has lots of examples of good values that I hope children everywhere can embrace.
I love it. Yeah, I think children and families are really going to love these stories. So I love the ice hockey element in this one. Where did that come from?
Well, I happen to be from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and even to this day, ice hockey is the favorite sport that I follow. And of course, my Luca happens to be one of my grandsons who lives in Pittsburgh, and he loves hockey, and the Penguins are his favorite team. And so what I try to do is build in a little bit of the personality and the interests of all of my grandchildren in each one. Each book is named after one of them. So I have to build in some of them in the books as well. So that's kind of where his particular theme of the book came from.
Would you say that this was an easy book for you to write and put out there, or were there some challenges along the way?
I think that there's challenges in each one because what I try to do is start with an outline and put down all the important ideas and link those together with the characters and then the idea of the book and the setting. I pull a lot of that from my own upbringing and experiences that I had, along with the grandchild's personality, along with interests that they have and ideas that they have. I bounce ideas off them before I even write it. So it's really a personal, I call it labor of love, putting these books together. Maybe different than just starting in, maybe as an author that doesn't really have such a personal desire to give messages out to children, but utilizing my grandchildren's personalities and such in each book. So it's kind of a challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge. But once I get the outline done and I know where it's going, it's off to the races.
It's a great idea to use an outline to start with. Did you ever find your story straying from that outline, maybe going somewhere you didn't expect?
Oh, surely. Because the outline is just getting what I wanted, just the highlights of my main messages and the storyline that I want to remember to include. But then I go on and I do a lot of research on the background of the topic. And when I do that, often I will find details that maybe I didn't know about or I learned about through some research, and I have to build those in. So it's a constant revision, if you will, of the outline even before I start the writing.
Do you ever get stuck? Do you ever get maybe kind of a writer's block thing, even though you have your ideas down in there, maybe just stuck for a creative place to go next?
I really don't get a writer's block. What I do find difficult is making the commitment of time. It takes a lot of time to write. And you literally have to make that personal commitment that you're going to put the time in to do it. So a book could be done quickly or it could take a year to write, depending on the time. Life gets in the way sometimes. And it's really more how quickly you want to get it done. But writer's block, no. Once I get the outline, I pretty much just write.
And if I'm keeping track correctly, this is book 3 of 10 in the series, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And actually, the 4th one is about 90% done. I mean, I'm talking a very rough first draft. That's what I end up with. Then you go through the whole thing and, do all the revisions and fine tuning and such. But yeah, the 4th one is probably, hopefully, going to be actually published and released this year. So that would be exciting.
That is exciting. Well, what wonderful messages here. What a great book. What a great series. Again, this one is titled Grammy's Treasure Hunt, Luca's Lessons. It's written by Joan Marie, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and available everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, traditional brick-and-mortar stores, everywhere. Well, Joan, once again, it's always such a delight talking with you. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Corey. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking with you when the 4th one comes out.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.